I'd like to welcome everybody here today. Good afternoon. I'm going to call the 32nd annual meeting of the Research Bureau to order. My name is John Spillane. I'm a Worcester attorney with the law firm of Spillane & Spillane, and it's been my pleasure to serve as the chair of the board of the Research Bureau. And on behalf of our executive committee and our board of directors, it's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon. This year, we have a theme for our annual meeting, which is building on a strong foundation. As Worcester capitalizes on its strong foundations to build its current social and economic success, for more than 3 decades, the Research Bureau has served to protect the public interest in Greater Worcester through collecting facts, engaging in analysis, offering insight and ideas for exploring and addressing local and regional public policy challenges. The organization has been steadfast in tackling tough issues while we continue to focus on a broad range of policy issues. And this year alone, as you probably know, we've spent considerable time looking into property tax challenges, post-employment liabilities, performance evaluations, tax increment financing, and urban design. And also, a major or special focus has been on public education and, of course, the Worcester Public Schools. And in recognition of that focus, we are honored that the Secretary will be here, Secretary James Peyser, the Commonwealth's Secretary of Education, and you will hear from him a little bit later in the program. So I would like to now begin the business portion of the meeting, and to do that, I'm going to call up Attorney Dee Moskos to kick us off. Dee?
Good afternoon, everyone. The directors received by email the minutes, so I'm going to ask for any changes or comments on the minutes. If not, a motion to adopt the minutes. Second. Any director has any comments on the minutes? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. At this time, I'd like to call Brian Thompson to the podium. Brian is the president and CEO of Commerce Bank, and as you know, Commerce Bank has been for many years a leading presenting sponsor for this event, and Brian will say a few words. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. And welcome. It's great to see so many of you here this afternoon. Thank you, John, for your exceptionally kind words, and it's been a privilege to serve as on the executive committee and on the board of the Research Bureau. On behalf of Duddy Massad and myself and the Commerce Bank team, we welcome you here this afternoon to the 32nd annual meeting. A particularly warm welcome to our speaker, Jim Peyser, who will be with us momentarily. And we thank him, obviously, for his service to the Commonwealth and particularly to the children that he ultimately represents. Our Lieutenant Governor is going to be with us as well in a while, but to Representative Hannah Kane, who is with us today from Shrewsbury, and other elected officials, we welcome you as well. And in particular, I'd like to acknowledge Ed Augustus, who's our city manager, and Maureen Bienda, who are doing, superintendent of schools, who are doing just a fantastic job representing you and representing our city. So to both of you, congratulations and thank you. Ed said that after the quick vote on the minutes, that's the way the council might want to run the meetings in the future. But also congratulations to Dan Morgado from the city from Shrewsbury for receiving the Fairman C. Cowan Municipal Leadership Award. Very well deserved, and we look forward to that presentation momentarily. As John mentioned, Commerce Bank has been a longtime supporter of the Research Bureau. We believe strongly in its mission and the role that it plays in our community. The research, it evaluates and it presents issues so that our public officials can hopefully make informed and take informed action. Our work is independent. It promotes informed debate and decision-making through public policy research, and those are all important words to our mission. We are particularly fortunate to have Tim McGurthy as our leader. His intellect and his experience are valued highly, and he's done a great job in that role. To Attorney John Spillane, our outgoing chairman, has provided exceptional leadership as well, putting forth our agenda that identifies the important the issues that we ultimately discuss. So, John, thank you for your leadership and contribution. As John mentioned, we at Commerce are about to embark on a new path. Effective tomorrow at the close of business, we will merge with Berkshire Bank. Although Berkshire will be a relatively new name to Worcester, it's a significant player in the banking arena in New England. Berkshire Bank's roots are in Pittsfield, but they have offices in Westboro, Boston, as well as Hampden County in the Springfield market, Hartford markets, Albany, a big presence, and west into Utica and some of the other areas of New York State, along down into New Jersey, into Pennsylvania. So they're a good-sized institution, and I think that they'll be a good partner for us. They've recently announced their relocation to Boston, so consequently Worcester is an important market to them as they travel east. They, like Commerce, have a long history of being a strong community-oriented bank, and our expectations are that they'll continue that commitment here in central Massachusetts. On Monday, there will be little change, as our people are the same, our name, Commerce Bank, will remain the same, and it will be on all our offices for a long time to come. I'd like to recognize Paul Kelly, who's here. Some of you may know him from days of a previous employer who has just joined Berkshire Bank, and he's been named regional president with responsibilities for Boston and Worcester, so you'll get to know him later, but also in the days to come. Many of you have asked about Mike Crawford and myself and what our roles will be, and I'm happy to say that we're going to continue to be advisors to the transaction for an extended period of time, so you'll see us in events like this and many others in the days ahead. So that will be our plans. Commerce has had the good fortune of being financially strong, has had great growth rates in excess of our peers, has the largest market share of deposits in the city of Worcester, has a great staff of employees, and important to this group and others has been an active and engaged bank in the community. And that is through our financial support and through our leadership. We are tremendously proud of all those accomplishments. Again, a special thanks to each of you for your support of the Research Bureau, and to Tim McGurthy for your excellent work and your staff. And we thank you for all your contributions to our region and to its success. Worcester is just a great city, and I think all of us are really realizing that now. It's a great place to work, it's a great place to live, and it's a good place to be. So thank you and best wishes to everyone, and I'll turn it back to John.
So I had the pleasure of succeeding Karen Duffy, who was the chair of the board before me, and as the immediate past chair, Karen has the pleasure of serving as the chair of the nominating committee, so I'd like to call Karen Duffy up, President of Worcester Credit Union.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me. So the nominating committee met, and we have determined the following recommendations. For the recommended candidates for officer positions, for chairman would be Abraham Haddad, vice chairman Deborah Penta, treasurer George Tetler, clerk Demetrius Moscas. Recommended candidates to be included on the executive committee, new candidates are Francis Madigan, Susan Mailman, and Todd Rodman. New members of the board, for inclusion of the board of the directors, are listed here. I'm not going to go through all the names, but I would take one motion to accept the recommendations for the officer positions, inclusion on the new members on the executive committee, and the new members on the board of directors. Could I have a motion? And a second? All in favor? All opposed? So voted. The other members of the board of directors are being listed, And then I do want to just point out that we have a couple of people rotating off the executive committee who have done enormous work for the organization over the years. Sandra Dunn, Gail Flanders-Weiss, and Robert Johnson. They're rotating off the executive committee, but Sandy and Gail will stay on the board. Rotating off the board, you have a list here as well. So we want to thank all of those people for their efforts and contributions to the organization. And that is my report, John.
Thank you, Karen, and congratulations to our new elected board members and our executive committee members. The Research Bureau is served by a very impressive board of directors and executive committee. As you can see from page 14 of our annual report, the officers, the members of the executive committee and the board are all leaders in Worcester business and in our nonprofit communities. Many are here with us this afternoon, and if I were to read their names, it would take too long, and so I'm not going to do that, but I would like to just ask our board to stand and be recognized at this time so that you can see who serves this organization. So if our board members can just stand up, please. Give them a round of applause. We have many partners that have supported this organization in such magnificent ways, and I'd like to thank them for contributing their time, their talent, and their treasure. There are a few people I want to specifically mention. Sandy Dunn, who is rotating off of the board, has served this organization for a long time. She also runs this magnificent facility. So Sandy and her staff, we're so grateful for everything you've done to host this each year, year in, year out, and we're most appreciative. I also want to thank the Telegram and Gazette for being our media sponsor. Deborah Penta of Penta Communications does a fine job in designing all of our program materials in our annual report. And Rick Powell, who serves on the executive committee, and his associates at the accounting firm of Greenberg, Rosenblatt, Cullen, Bitzoli. We're so appreciative and grateful for their contributions over the many, many years. You'll notice in the program we have over 40 sponsors. They're listed prominently in the program, and I encourage you to look at our annual report and to learn who supports us. And I think the monitors, well, I guess the monitor isn't displaying it, but I do want to thank some of our major longtime sponsors. Fallon Health has been there for us for many, many years, and we're most grateful to Fallon, St. Gobain, Polar Beverages, Hanover Insurance, Massport, Rand Whitney, and AbbVie. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our unique collaborative relationship with Assumption College, and I noticed that Dr. Francesco Cesareo is here, and I thank you for serving as our sponsor and helping to cultivate the relationship. And last but not least, there are many individuals in here who have supported this organization over the years. There are businesses, small businesses. You've heard about some of our larger businesses, but the smaller businesses, we appreciate your support. And of course, the foundations have been very, very, very supportive, and we're most grateful for that. I do want to I want to recognize some of our elected officials that are here, and I have it written down. And hopefully, I always do this at the risk of omitting somebody, so if I do, I will have another chance to redeem myself and bat cleanup later in the program. We are joined by our city manager, Ed Augustus, who, as Brian said, has done a phenomenal job leading the city, and we appreciate his stewardship and his leadership. We have Worcester City Councilor Connie Lukes, who is here. Maureen Benenda is here, and she's going to introduce the secretary. We also have several state representatives. Representative Kate Campanelli is here. Representative Hannah Kane, who you'll hear from later in the program. Representative Joe McKenna. And we have several members of the Shrewsbury Board of Selectmen who are here, and I'd like to recognize them as well. Selectman Mo DiPaolo, Selectman Jim Kane, husband of Hannah Kane and a dear friend, Selectman John LeBeau, and Selectman Maura Miller. So hopefully I've got everybody, but I will have another opportunity if I've missed somebody, and I know Tom Quinn is circling the audience to make sure we don't miss anybody. It's now my pleasure to introduce Tim McGurthy, who I know you know very well. He was appointed 3.5 years ago as the leader of this organization. He formerly served as the Chief Development Officer for the City of Worcester and Chief Executive Officer of the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. While employed by the city, he oversaw 9 divisions related to business development, culture, housing, neighborhoods, planning, workforce development, and he worked closely with private partners to facilitate transformative redevelopment projects in the city. So it is my pleasure to call our Executive Director, Tim McGurthy, to say a few words on behalf of the organization.
Thank you, John. In the late 1600s, Europeans first arrived on the shores of Lake Quinsigamond seeking to build a new community. As tensions between colonists and indigenous peoples flared, the settlement was abandoned, not once, but twice, and Worcester was not established as an official town until 1722. Yet over the years, this struggling community took root and became a center for transportation, industry, and innovation. It also became a home for people from across the globe, a crossroads for ideas and inspiration. Worcester's ability to struggle, to adapt, to survive, to strive, and to succeed is a hallmark of this city and its people. It is the foundation of our growth as we build on the past, embrace the present, and anticipate a vibrant future. Our living history continues not only in our 3-century-old government, but in our neighborhoods, our public schools, our colleges and universities, our cultural institutions, and our business community. Even in my short decade here in Worcester, I've watched this city carefully and deliberately seed opportunities in our downtown, our neighborhoods, and in our physical and social infrastructure. We have new residences, businesses, schools, and cultural opportunities. We have new recreational and transportation opportunities. Today's public and private investment is changing the Worcester experience for the better. Yet our challenges remain. While we succeed in many areas, we continue to struggle in others. Property tax rates are among the highest in the Commonwealth. Our post-employment liability continues to grow, and we have limited citizen interest in public service. Local job growth is relatively flat, although unemployment is generally decreasing. Almost a quarter of our population is in poverty, with people of color disproportionately impacted, and too many of our public school students fail to meet proficiency levels in English, math, and especially science. In order to move from struggle to adaptation to success, we cannot ignore the roots of our communal problems or simply wish for challenges to disappear. The mission of the Research Bureau, while sometimes unpopular, is to support our successes, identify our failures, and offer a pathway for those striving toward positive change. I submit 2 key initiatives that highlight our role. First, our most important initiative, and the reason we're so pleased that Secretary Peyser could join us today, focuses on public education. Public education is not only critical to the future of our young people, but it is critical to the future of our civic leadership. In 2016, the Research Bureau and the Worcester Education Collaborative released The Urgency of Excellence, Considerations for the School Committee and New Superintendent of Schools in Worcester. This report highlighted the troubling gap between Worcester's goals and achievements in meeting the federal Race to the Top guidelines for academic outcomes. We called for a new vision and a strategic plan that would engage the schools, the community, and civic and business leadership in an effort to craft a framework for operations, finance, and teaching and learning that would position the Worcester Public Schools as the best urban school district in the region and beyond. Superintendent Benenda has embraced the initiative and has worked hand in glove with the Research Bureau, WEC, and others to engage on the challenges of public education and advance solutions. We are now working with a community coalition to compile quantitative and qualitative analyses of the schools, which will be transformed into targeted recommendations. We expect a draft report by the end of the year and a final strategic plan by the first quarter of 2018. one we hope will be implemented by both the Worcester Public Schools and a community-driven task force. Our second major initiative is focused on the property tax and its impact on economic growth. In November 2016, we released tax classification, Passing the Bucks, a report that explored the impact of the tax rate on residential, commercial, and industrial property owners. We examined the impact of property tax changes over 3 decades in every city and town in Massachusetts. We found that all properties, but especially commercial and industrial properties, were negatively impacted by significant changes in tax rates. We recommended that Worcester consider a transition to the single tax rate, a move that would buffer all property owners from year-over-year tax rate changes. In May of this year, we released a Research Bureau policy alternative, tax rates, that laid out a formula and a transition process to serve as a model for City Council as it engages on the annual tax rate process. The City Council's Economic Development Committee took up that discussion, and while there appears to remain significant political opposition to the consideration of a single tax rate, our data and recommendations have both incited and informed the conversation. Without you, the Research Bureau could not do this work. You have ensured that over the decades, we have not only survived, but thrived as a critical voice in Worcester's civic life. We have many to thank for that success. Our executive committee and our board of directors offer their time and their efforts to ensure that we have the capacity to focus day by day on the needs of Worcester and its government. I am truly grateful to John Spillane, our outgoing chair, and all of the board for your ongoing commitment to the Research Bureau and the cause of informed public policy making. While the work of our board is impressive, and we are also a product of and grateful to the generosity of a much larger community of stakeholders. In our annual report, as John mentioned, you'll see listings of the many businesses, institutions, and individuals that provide invaluable support to our efforts. Our contributors represent the civic and business strength of Greater Worcester. A few deserve special recognition. Commerce Bank has been our presenting sponsor for nearly a decade. Many thanks to Duddy, to Brian, and to Mike for their ongoing continuous support and involvement in all of our efforts. While we look forward to welcoming Berkshire Bank and its team even more fully into the Worcester community, we will always appreciate our friends at Commerce Bank. Greenberg, Rosenblatt, Cullen, Bizzoli has been an integral part of the Research Bureau's operations for decades and has provided incomparable accounting work on our behalf week after week. Rick Powell and Shelley Truitt are essentially extensions of the Research Bureau, part of our family as we work to move our progress forward. Penta Communications has given the Research Bureau a digital presence that ensures we reach a community well beyond our home at 500 Salisbury Street. Deborah Penta, our incoming vice chair, and her team are instrumental in ensuring a professional and effective voice for our findings. I also want to acknowledge our media sponsor, the Telegram and Gazette, and the DCU Center, organizations that work with us on multiple fronts and on multiple events. Sandy Dunn, the DCU Center General Manager, has served as chairman of our board and as an active member of our executive committee for many years. Finally, Worcester is very fortunate to have a strong philanthropic community. The Alden Trust, Daniels, Ellsworth, Fletcher, Fuller, Harrington, Hoche Schofield, McAvoy, Stoddard, and Wyman Gordon Foundations, the Health Foundation of Central Massachusetts, and the Greater Worcester Community Foundation have supported our efforts over the years and have ensured that Worcester is the smallest region in the country to boast a local public policy research and analysis organization. These organizations represent the legacy, the foundation of civic involvement that even today empowers the Worcester community. Thank you, each and every one of you, for your commitment to our organization and to our mission. We value the trust you have placed in our efforts and in our impact. We will continue to work hard to deserve it. Thank you.
pleased to introduce Maureen Benenda, our Superintendent of the Worcester Public Schools, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Superintendent Benenda was appointed in March of 2006 and has been a leader in public education in Worcester for more than 4 decades. As you probably know, she has been a teacher and an administrator, most recently serving as a principal of the South High School. She is a passionate supporter of the Worcester Public Schools and a great partner to the Research Bureau as we work collaboratively on the Worcester Public Schools Strategic Planning Initiative. So it's my pleasure to introduce Maureen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very thankful that I was asked to be able to come today. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you that are here today for all that all of you do for the Worcester Public Schools, for our students, and for our families. And I'd like to offer a special thank you to both the Worcester Research Bureau and the Worcester Educational Collaborative for your support of our strategic plan. So I'm now honored to introduce our featured speaker, James Peyser, Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Jim is Governor Baker's top advisor on education. He helped shape the Commonwealth's education reform agenda. He is directly responsible for early childhood education, K through 12, and higher education in Massachusetts. Prior to his appointment, he served as the managing director at the New Schools Venture Fund, chairman of the Massachusetts Board of Education, and was an education advisor to Governor Bill Weld, Jane Swift, and Mitt Romney. He is also the executive director of the Pioneer Institute for Public Policy Research. Secretary Peyser received his bachelor's degree from Colgate University and his Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy from Tufts University, the Fletcher School. I'm proud to present to you today Speaker James A. Peyser, Secretary of Education.
Good afternoon, everybody. As with all great speeches, I should start with an apology. Sorry I'm late. Although I did learn from Tim's speech, which was, I had really, and I'm sure all of you were well aware that it took about 100 years to settle Worcester. I assume these folks were coming from Boston. That's about how long it took me to get out here tonight. So I felt like I was one of you in that trek out of the East Coast. So I also want to say it's a great honor to be at the Research Bureau. You know, Maureen mentioned in my introduction that I used to be the executive director of Pioneer Institute. I took that job or got into that position in 1993, so that's getting close to 25 years ago. And it was very early on that I began my relationship with Roberta Schaefer and what was then the Worcester Municipal Research Bureau. So I feel like I've been part of this organization for a long time. I didn't realize it was only 32 years. I was almost there at the beginning. I wish I had started earlier so I could have been there. But it is great to be here. It's great to be with you, and I'm honored to speak tonight about the state of education in Massachusetts and some of the initiatives and priorities of the Baker-Polito administration to address some of our continuing challenges. So, you know, in talking about Massachusetts and its sort of place in the education world, it's very, I think, natural to acknowledge the reality that we are viewed from the rest of the country as being the gold standard. Forbes magazine describes us as the most educated state in the country. Education Week, which produces an annual report called Quality Counts, where they give a grade to every state in the country, gives us the highest grade. The U.S. News and World Report, as you probably heard maybe 6 months ago or so, rated Massachusetts the #1 state in the country, and the primary reason for that ranking was the high esteem in which they held our public education system. And we are, when you look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a national test that's administered by the U.S. Department of Education across all 50 states, we rank #1 in virtually every subject and grade level. So At a very high level, the news is very good. We're as good as it gets in the United States. But when you look a little bit deeper at what the data suggests and what some of our challenges are, it's pretty clear to see that we aren't where we need to be. And we certainly can't afford to rest on our laurels. So a couple of observations just generally about the environment. First is, even though we're the best at the moment in the country, the other states in the United States are investing heavily in education and are trying to catch up. So just standing still isn't enough to keep us ahead of our peers. But even more important, we exist in a global economy, in a world in which we are competing, especially in Massachusetts, as much against countries like India and China and Singapore and Germany as we are against North Carolina, California, and Texas. So those countries as well are catching up, and in some cases are already ahead of where we are. Society in general is changing, even as we stand here. Technology is changing our daily lives. It's certainly changing the expectations in the workplace, and our education system has to change as well. The bar is rising even as we speak. And similarly, the demands of employers for the skills that they expect students to have and the knowledge base that they bring to their businesses is also changing. And when I say changing, I don't just mean it's different, but the expectations are getting higher all the time. And then finally, the demographics of our Commonwealth are also changing. And that's creating additional challenges and putting new pressures on our education system. Because first of all, the overall school-age population is flat or declining, and that will continue for many years to come. And the diversity of of that student-age population or that school-age population is increasing all the time. And so the students who are increasingly making up a larger and larger portion of our public education system are students who have historically lagged behind their peers. And therefore, in order for us to lift them up and to maintain our standing overall, we again need to do better just to stay in place, let alone to improve. And when you look at some of the data that just describes at a high level, or that puts us in such a strong position when you look at the overall data, when you peel the onion a little bit, you see that there are some areas for serious concern. Now, I don't mean to sort of suggest that the glass is half empty, but I do want to suggest that the glass isn't anywhere close to being full. So we're number 3 in the country when it comes to the quality of early education, but we're number 19 when it comes to the educational access at early education, but we're number 19 when it comes to the quality of that experience. We started implementing MCAS back in 2001 in 3rd grade, and since that first administration of the third grade reading assessment, we have seen absolutely no improvement in the overall level of proficiency among our 3rd graders in reading. That's true across the state. It's true in Worcester as well. We've seen similarly flat scores when you look at that National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. Since we saw significant increases in the first 10 to 15 years after education reform, but since 2007, our NAEP scores on 4th grade reading, 4th grade math, 8th grade reading, 8th grade math have been essentially flatlined. 1/3 of, when you look at those NAEP data at the overall level, that's worrisome. But when you look at the differences in performance between different subgroups, it becomes even more concerning. So in particular, I use one example, 8th grade math. On 8th grade math, Massachusetts ranks number 1 in the country. But we rank number 49 when it comes to the gap between our white students and our Hispanic students. And number 49 being second to last. So we look great when you look at the overall numbers. When you look at our subgroups and you look at the achievement gaps within them, the picture is not nearly as positive. About 1/3 of the students graduating from public high schools who go on to a public college or university require remediation before being able to take credit-bearing courses, especially in math. 1/3 of our students. And when you look at community colleges, that number is 50%, 60%. And finally, when you look at higher education, especially within our public system, what you'll see is that our graduation rates on time, and by on time I mean certainly within 4 years or within 6 years from a 4-year institution, or 2 years and 3 years from a community college, are on the order of 50%, in some cases significantly less. So there are a lot of challenges, notwithstanding our high status relative to our peers. And when you look at some of this data and when you look at the performance of our school system from a business perspective, there are also reasons to be concerned. The Mass Business Roundtable conducted a survey of its members a couple of months ago, and basically the results were this. The 80% of their members, the survey asked the membership to rate their local school system, and 80% of their members gave their local schools an A or B rating, which is obviously pretty good. They were then asked to rate those same schools on how well prepared their students were to enter the workforce, and in particular to gain employment at their companies. And 80% of them gave those same schools a C or a D. When you look at the degree production in our public higher education system, only about 20% of our bachelor's degrees are in STEM fields. Only about 3% of our undergraduate and graduate degrees are in computer science, and only about 5% are in engineering. And given the level of dependence our economy has on these disciplines and on students coming out with these kind of credentials, that's not nearly good enough. Less than 25% of our schools offer computer science courses, and the vast majority of students come out of their K-12 experience without ever having a computer science course of any kind. And when you look at the gap between boys and girls, the number of girls who have that computer science experience before they finish high school is vanishingly small. And then finally, when you look at the teachers who we are certifying, the new teachers coming into the field, there are only a handful every year who are being certified in physics, chemistry, or engineering. The short answer to all of this is we may have done a lot that's right over the last 25 years. We may have had a lot of success, and we deserve to sort of pat ourselves on the back for the hard work and the achievements that we have seen to date, but we cannot afford to stand still. Andy Grove, who was the sort of legendary CEO of Intel, is sort of famous for saying that success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, and that only the paranoid survive. And that's funny, but unfortunately it's probably true. We need to really regain that sense of urgency that animated education reform back in 1993 when it was originally enacted. I feel to some extent we have become complacent because of our success and haven't focused enough on the challenges that lie in front of us. Not to criticize the great work that's been done, but to recognize the opportunity and the challenge that lies ahead of us that we need to meet. For that reason, I want to congratulate the Research Bureau and the Worcester Education Collaborative and the school district and all of the stakeholders who are here for the Urgency of Excellence report, for the strategic planning process that's underway, and for all of the work that's going on in order to recreate that sense of urgency, reclaim that sense of mission and purpose and vision for the future that we all need. So Worcester is leading the way, and I urge you all to continue the work forward and to pursue it aggressively. Well, I want to now shift and talk a little bit about what the Baker-Polito administration is doing and some of our key initiatives when it comes to education and furthering education reform. And I'd say there are basically 5 areas, and I'll go quickly through the 5 of them, and I think we'll have time for some questions and answers when we're done. So the first is to reinforce the foundations of education reform, sort of strengthen the building blocks that got us to where we are today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We need to strengthen the quality of early education. I mentioned earlier about access, the sort of national data comparing access to quality. We need to focus even more strongly around quality in early education. We need to do more to empower our schools and our educators. And again, I'll discuss this in more detail. We need to develop and expand STEM and career pathways, especially in high school, but reaching down into middle school and beyond. And we need to address the looming crisis, the growing crisis in college affordability and completion. So what are we doing in each of those areas? First, in terms of the foundation, strengthening or reinforcing the foundations of education reform. We've been addressing our standards and assessments. We've recently reviewed and updated our English language arts and math assessments. We've adopted revised science standards, which tries to rebalance the curriculum such that there's more focus on doing rather than just knowing what science is about. We've initiated and developed and launched new digital literacy and computer science curriculum frameworks, including a set of standards around teacher certification in those fields. And we have just recently, as you all may be aware, and as you all will be even more aware next week, we have developed and updated our MCAS, so we've created a next generation MCAS assessment that is aligned to those new standards in English and math, results of which are going to be announced, I think, within a week. Are you ready for that, Maureen? Okay. It'll all be fine. It'll all be fine. I will say, just as a preview, and some of this has come out, the data will look a little bit different than it did before. The performance categories have different labels. The standards have been reset in a way that isn't entirely consistent with what was the case in the year or two before. And so the data will look a little bit different, and therefore it's going to require some thoughtful analysis to understand what the numbers mean. But basically, this is a new baseline that we're establishing in order to track our growth and progress over time, and more so than it is a comparison point to what's gone on in the past. But that's all new, and I think all to the good in terms of strengthening our standards and assessments. We're continuing to drive for accountability for results. And as you know, Lawrence has been in receivership, state receivership, for the last 6+ years. And what we've seen in Lawrence is really, I think, a pretty remarkable success story, where you've gone from a situation back in 2011 where you've had 25 schools in the city, only 3 of which were level 1 or level 2, which are the 2 highest performing level categories in our accountability system. Now there are 13. Now that's 13 out of 25. That means 12 are still level 3 or 4, but that's a long way from where we started from. And that demonstrates the kind of progress that's possible when the state and local communities that are struggling form a partnership in order to support their schools and students. We've taken that further over the last couple of years by intervening in both Holyoke and in Southbridge to address serious underperforming issues and capacity challenges in both of those school districts. The third sort of pillar, if you will, of education reform is equitable and sustainable financing. And on that front, we have undertaken 2 things, I would say. One is we have continued to meet and exceed our responsibilities under the current foundation formula in each year of this administration. And in addition to that, in the current fiscal year, through the initiative of the Baker-Polito administration in their budget and with the endorsement of the legislature, we have adopted a new metric or a new factor for healthcare that recognizes the fact that when the foundation formula was originally created, the expectation for healthcare growth was significantly below what the reality has been. And so we're making adjustments that over time are going to have meaningful impact on the overall level of school funding, especially in districts like Worcester. So in all of these cases, what we're trying to do, and importantly, what we're not doing is we're not walking away from what got us here. What got us here was a focus on these core foundations of standards, assessments, accountability for results, and financing that ensured that we had the conditions for success that allowed our educators to do what they need to do at school districts and within the schools. And so we need to not walk away from it. We need to strengthen those basic foundations. So that's the first thing. Second is around the quality of early education. So there's been a lot of focus over the last decade or more on access to early education, on increasing the resources available, in particular for subsidized early education, so more and more working parents can afford to have childcare that enables them to work. And access is tremendously important and continues to be a priority. Nonetheless, even more important is the quality of that educational experience, because in the end, access to childcare, while important, especially from a workforce point of view, is intended to lay a foundation to enable student success both in their educational career in K-12 and as their life unfolds beyond that. And in the absence of having high quality early education, that impact is weak or non-existent. So it's not enough to have access, you have to have quality. And we haven't focused enough on that. A couple of things that we've done. First of all, we have instituted the largest rate increase for early education providers, at least in the history of the Department of Early Education and Care over the last decade. That's $28 million that's going to providers that enables them to increase the compensation of their workforce, which in turn ensures greater stability and hopefully attracts greater quality and talent into the field. Second thing we have done is we've created a $33 million flexible resource for quality improvement that allows us to make investments in the field especially in the development of the workforce to strengthen the quality of early education across the Commonwealth. And finally, we are in the process of developing and strengthening our quality standards so that we are clear to our providers what constitutes at least the basic components of a high-quality early education experience, and allows us to start aligning and mobilizing our resources around those standards and expectations. So addressing the issue of quality in early education. Third thing is empowering schools and educators. So I talked about Lawrence a minute ago, and one of the basic strategic approaches that Jeff Riley, the superintendent in Lawrence, has taken since receivership began was to devolve resources and authority away from the central office and place more and more of those resources and decision-making authority within schools. And in turn, holding those school leadership teams accountable for results. That, I think, has been in some ways the key structural change and the key strategic change that has unlocked the performance within Lawrence. And what we're trying to do is find ways to take that basic model to more places. And the first place that I would point towards is the Springfield Empowerment Zone. So in Springfield, there were 8 middle schools that were low performing and that were on the verge of receivership. And in lieu of receivership, the state worked with the city to develop a sort of joint shared state-local governance body that oversees now those 8 schools. And as part of that approach, they essentially devolved 85% of all the resources, all the financial resources per student down to the school level, and gave the school leadership teams the authority to make decisions about how those resources are to be allocated. And in turn, established a performance management system that ensures that they are meeting expectations, and if they are not, provides a mechanism for replacing school leadership, or in some cases, bringing in third parties to operate those schools under contract. That has now been going on, they were into their 3rd year. And while it's still too early to see the data that can demonstrate the success of this, all of the evidence that I've seen so far suggests that this is moving in the right direction, having powerful results, especially powerful results in terms of the school cultures and in terms of the level of investment and ownership that educators have in their own work and in the success of their children. I think it's been transformative, and I think it presents a model for us around the state. And to that end, the governor has endorsed legislation that was drafted by Representative Peyser and Senator Lesser, which would establish a legal framework or structure that would enable the replication of the Springfield Empowerment Zone in other districts across the Commonwealth. At the end of the day, I believe strongly that schools are the unit of change, and that we need to figure out how to create structures and systems across the state but within districts that do exactly what we've been describing, which is to devolve as much authority authority and resources down to the schools, empower educators on the ground to make decisions, and then provide performance management systems to ensure that they are accountable for their results. And then fourth, STEM and career pathways. So as I mentioned, we have a reputation in Massachusetts of being a leader in STEM fields when it comes certainly to our businesses and to our economy as a whole. And with respect to certain educational institutions as well, MIT perhaps most notably, but WPI and others that are clearly on the leading edge of technology, both from a development point of view and an educational point of view. Nevertheless, when you look at our public education system as a whole, we are not nearly as strong as we need to be to maintain our leadership position as the rest of the country and the rest of the world catches up. So we've been doing a number of things here. In some ways, the biggest one from a dollar point of view anyway, is we have invested so far over $35 million in what are called skills capital grants, which go to vocational programs in vocational schools, community colleges, and certain community-based organizations, in particular in order to strengthen programs around manufacturing and engineering, which is where well over 50% of these resources have gone. We've also developed what are called innovation pathways, and this is being launched as we speak. And innovation pathways are career-oriented courses of study within high schools that are based on a close partnership between a high school and an employer or a set of employers that creates a program of study over the 4 years that is geared towards that particular sector and the careers that are available to students in them. So just give you an example, it might be IT might be a pathway program, there would be a partnership between a high school and or a school district and an employer and employers in the field. They would develop certain coursework that is aligned specifically to the IT sector that could either be distinct from the regular curriculum or fully integrated in it. It would ensure that there are opportunities for career exploration for the students. It would create opportunities for internships and co-op programs within the field, all of which is designed not to be vocational education, but to connect career opportunity to education, to academic learning in order to create real relevance and hopefully motivation for young people to succeed while they're in school, and hopefully to open up new vistas for them in terms of what is possible in their career. And then one other thing I'll mention, which is related to it, but independent as well, is we have been aggressively trying to expand the number of paid internships through what's called a Mass STEM at Work initiative, which is part of connecting activities, whereby high school students are given paid internships over the summer with employers. And in doing so are not only getting experience in a real world environment, but are also creating the kind of connections between their schoolwork and career possibilities that makes them better students. So expanding and developing STEM and career pathways is the fourth area. And then the final one is around college affordability and completion. And there are a number of things that we're doing here. I'll just mention two in particular. One is we are launching an early college initiative, and we have, as of now, we have received over 30, almost 35 applications from high schools around the Commonwealth to establish and designate early college programs in their high schools, which effectively are partnerships between a high school and a college, sometimes a community college, sometimes a state college or university, even UMass or private colleges, in order to create this kind of course of study that is putting students on a pathway to college, including the ability to earn at least 12 college credits before they complete college. And the idea here in particular is to focus on those students who wouldn't otherwise think about college as being part of their future, who are first-generation students who may not have a parent or may not have role models who have been to college, who may not have a sense that that's what is in store for them, in order to not only prepare them for college so that they will succeed, but to give them the vision of what's possible in their lives. So early college programs relate to college affordability and completion in two ways. One is, as I said, if you're taking college courses and passing college courses before you get out of high school, then it's a natural thing not only to go to college when you're done, but to know that you can succeed when you get there. And second, these credits are free to the students. So they would earn at least one semester, in some cases 2 or more, before they get out of high school. And that's not a trivial sum of money, as those of you who have sent children to college in the last century would know. And then finally, there's something called Commonwealth Commitment, which is an initiative that was launched by the governor I guess a year and a half ago, which basically says for students who go full-time to a community college, earn their associate's degree, then transfer and go full-time to a four-year institution for their junior and senior year, a public four-year institution for their junior or senior year, we will provide a set of discounts and rebates for those students such that their total four-year college experience, not counting room and board if they wanted to reside in their four-year institution in their junior and senior year, but that total four-year college experience would cost less than $30,000. Now again, for anyone who's had anything to do with college in your lifetime, I think you know that that's a pretty great deal. I've got children, I've got 2 daughters who have been to college, one who's still in there, and they're both at private universities. And I can tell you that if it was $30,000 for 4 years, we might have made a different choice. At least I might have made a different choice. I don't know if they would. But $30,000 for a 4-year degree is an amazing bargain, and that's before financial aid. And so students who are eligible for financial aid may be looking at costs that are more like $15,000 or less. So anyway, so there's good news on that front. There is much more to do. So I started out with a lot of statistics, and I'd like to close with another one. There's another assessment that our students in Massachusetts take. It's called the Peyser exam, and it is administered and overseen by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. And it's administered every couple of years, and Massachusetts participated in this assessment, in particular in science, in 2015, as if it were a country. So the PISA exam is administered at a national level, but states were given the opportunity to participate at a higher level so that their results could be compared to other countries in the sample. So Massachusetts participated in this in 2015, and we just got the results back maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And this is the science test. And what the results showed is that we were number 6 in the world. And actually, if you sort of look at it from a statistical point of view, we were tied for second. A statistically significant point of view, we were tied for second. So that's pretty good. We can do better, but it's pretty good. But what was much more important than our ranking was what the data showed about our own results. And in particular, what it showed was that the 85% of the variation in our Massachusetts results, meaning 85% of the difference in student performance on that assessment, can be attributed to factors that are in schools, that have to do with what goes on in our schools. And this is incredibly powerful. This data point is incredibly powerful because if you ask most researchers, what they will tell you is, what determines a student's performance is the educational level of their parents, it's their family income, it's their zip code or their community. It's things that have nothing to do with what goes on in schools. But what this data suggests is that, in fact, what goes on in schools matters. And it matters a lot. And that's good news for all of us, because it means that the kinds of challenges that I've been talking about, the kinds of challenges that our students are facing, are challenges that we can affect, that we can change, that we can improve. But we have to keep the pressure on ourselves. We have to keep working. We have to keep getting better. We have to feel the sense of urgency that this work is as important as today as it was 25 years ago when education reform was first enacted. I want to thank you for letting me be here tonight. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing to create that sense of urgency here in Worcester, and I look forward to our conversation going forward. Thank you very much. So Tim, how do you want to handle this?
Yeah, I apologize. In light of time, I'm sure the secretary would be happy to answer questions during the reception after for a few minutes. But we do want to move to the.
By the way, did you open the bar up while you were waiting, while you were delayed?
No, that would have
my
kept
speech would have been much
there.
better if you had a few beers first.
But thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah,
Secretary.
thank you,
That's
Tim. I
excellent,
appreciate it.
and we'll have questions, I'm sure, immediately.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, we do have the Fair Cowan Award, Municipal Leadership Award. We'd like to recognize somebody very special, and to do that, we're going to ask Representative Hannah Kane to come up, and I understand Karen, our Lieutenant Governor, is here as well. And so I'm just going to introduce Hannah Kane, who is, as you probably know, the representative for the 11th Worcester District, representing the towns of Westboro and Shrewsbury. Hannah is the ranking member of the Joint Committee on Public Health. She's on the Joint Committee on Marijuana Policy, as well as a member of the Joint Committee on Transportation. Hannah and her husband have been involved in the town of Shrewsbury for many years. Hannah has served on the town. She's was an elected town meeting member, and she served on the Shrewsbury Finance Committee. Her husband, Jim Kane, who's here, is on the town committee, and it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Kane, who will introduce a very special guest.
Good evening. Dan Morgado thought he could quietly slip into retirement and nary anyone would notice. For one of the few times in his professional career, Dan was wrong. As you may know, Shrewsbury does not change town managers often. Prior to Dan's 20 years of exceptional service was Mr. Richard Carney's 41 years leading our town. We are a community that excels at long-term relationships. I myself hope I'm in one right now. It's an honor for me to tell you about someone with whom I hold in the highest regard. Dan Morgado is a colleague, a mentor, and a friend who I've worked with in various municipal capacities for over 16 years. Margaret Chase Smith, the first woman to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate, had a perspective on public service that I believe epitomizes Dan Morgado. She said, "My creed is that public service must be more than doing a job efficiently and honestly. It must be a complete dedication to the people with full recognition that every human being is entitled to courtesy and consideration. And constructive criticism is not only to be expected, but sought. That smears are not only to be expected, but fought, and that honor is earned, not bought." Dan Morgado came to work each and every day dedicated to our town, and with the utmost respect for every resident and every employee, and he received the same in return. Dan welcomed the thinking of all through his open door policy, and he treated those who questioned his conclusions with the same respect as those who championed them. And importantly, Dan was not afraid to admit when his thinking had evolved. Dan oversaw our community in a time of tremendous residential development, and he balanced the needs of school growth, infrastructure, and long-term economic development with his unyielding respect for taxpayers. Dan's grasp of all municipal issues and his ability to put his hands on the exact piece of paper containing the remote information you questioned him on was legendary. At town meetings, Dan sat with overfilled binders all around him, and you just knew that when a novice town meeting member would stand to ask Dan a question they thought impossible to answer, that Dan would indeed know precisely where to find the answer, just happen to have it with him, and then proceed to explain in mind-numbing detail more than you ever really wanted to know. Dan's annoying preparedness and the respectful treatment of all bought Dan a currency in our community that few leaders gain and even fewer know how to spend. Dan's prowess as a municipal leader is not just recognized by those he's worked with and the legions he's taught in his classroom. As many of you here know firsthand, Dan shared his skills and knowledge in an effort to inform other municipal, business, and community leaders across the Commonwealth. A generation of leaders have benefited from Dan's insight, his professionalism, and his passionate approach to both the daily nuts and bolts of municipal government and the need to plan for the long term through fiscal discipline and forward thinking. My very favorite memory of Dan is from June 2014. It was the evening before our community would take a critical vote on an operational override that would provide much needed funds for our schools and municipal operations. We planned an event on the Shrewsbury Town Common, and hundreds of supporters, from young families to town elders, from new residents to town patriarchs, had come out to hold signs, eat pizza, and reflect on all the hard work we had done to prepare our community with the knowledge necessary to take this momentous vote. While there were certainly people opposed to the effort, our community had not been divided in the months leading up to the vote, but rather united in the need to have an informed conversation about the choices that lay ahead and the decisions we would have to make if the effort failed. We had undertaken a difficult discussion in a respectful, inclusive, and fact-based manner. As Dan Morgado walked down to the Common on that beautiful late afternoon, swelling with a large crowd of enthusiastic people, young and old, he turned to me and smiled and said, "This was Americana at its best." Dan was thrilled to see so many diverse people civically engaged, showing their community spirit and acknowledging their responsibility to be caretakers of our collective community. And as I watched Dan take in the display of civic pride, I realized that in the final years of Dan's service to Shrewsbury, Shrewsbury now reflected the very best of Dan. For all that Dan Morgado has accomplished in his role leading Shrewsbury and other communities, I suspect that what's most enduring accomplishment will be is not what he accomplished, but how. Dan, you may have thought that you slipped into retirement, but you leave not only a legacy of quiet, steadfast leadership, you leave a roadmap for others on how to excel in a career dedicated to public service. Like Fairman Cowan, your life has been one of purpose and passion, and your commitment to excellence in local government has inspired so many. Congratulations on your most fitting recognition as recipient of the Fairman C. Cowan Municipal Leadership Award. It's now also my honor to introduce my friend, a woman who preceded me in this role and who, like me, enjoyed the opportunity to be schooled by Dan in the classroom of our community of Shrewsbury, Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. When I heard that Dan was being recognized for his achievements as a public official in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for his leadership in our hometown of Shrewsbury, I certainly wanted to be here for this moment. First, I just want to thank the Research Bureau for your many years of work improving not only this region of our Commonwealth, but studying and analyzing issues that have helped this Commonwealth move forward. I want to recognize the Shrewsbury leadership team that is all here. You're doing an amazing job, and you certainly are helping Shrewsbury achieve great success. Could you please stand and be recognized? Hannah did a wonderful job talking about how leadership matters and how our leadership in Shrewsbury has really helped our community achieve great success. I'm here to just say thank you as a friend to Dan for his guidance and support and mentor to me as a public official here in this Commonwealth, starting in my early career as a selectman in Shrewsbury with Dan as the new town manager then, and for my 10 years as a member of the House of Representatives and now as your lieutenant governor. And I'm grateful for the years that I had to be able to work with you in my various roles to really understand how to be a good public servant. And now, as I transitioned into this role, to have been able to call upon you and ask you for advice about how to build a stronger relationship between state government and the cities and towns of this Commonwealth was one of the first questions that I asked Dan, how are we going to do this? And from there, I want to just state that it was Dan's ideas around the Community Compact program that I have been championing for our administration, that we have now been able to sign 306 best practice compacts with obviously 306 cities and towns of this Commonwealth. And that came from Dan's thinking that it first of all needed to be voluntary, needed to be funded, and it needed to be community driven. And I certainly endeavored to get to all 351 cities and towns working on best practices compacts to improve the quality of local governance all across this Commonwealth. And when you think about that, how powerful it is, that not just in some cities and towns will communities be prepared and ready for success, but if we can set that foundation across the entire Commonwealth, no matter which town you live in, whether it's Shrewsbury or a community in Western Mass or in the most eastern part or on the Cape or the Islands, you will have a good experience in this Commonwealth. And it's because of people like Dan Morgado dedicating his career to public service that we invite and encourage more people to think about public service as a career so that you can truly make a difference in the lives of people, which Dan has. Congratulations, Dan, and thank you. And thank you for continuing your leadership as a part-time employee of our administration, working on the Joint Labor Relations Commission, doing incredible work there. So obviously the career continues to benefit many people across our Commonwealth. Thank you all, and congratulations, Dan.
Thank you so much, Representative Kane, Lieutenant Governor Polito. Your comments were outstanding. I understand that I'm what's standing between you and the cocktail hour. But I want to just, when I look around the room, you know, I've intersected with so many of you in this room in my career here in central Massachusetts. First working for Mr. Connie, and then some time I spent in Blackstone and then in Grafton and Shrewsbury. And it's wonderful to see so many of you, because this is such a wonderful community. I mean, the work, first to be mentioned was Mr. Cowan, you know, a man of huge accomplishment, and also the previous recipients of this award. It really is a tremendous honor. But it's been a wonderful experience working in the Worcester area. There's so much outstanding abilities and capacities here in central Massachusetts, as the Secretary talked about. It's just so wonderful. And to be able to work with people, work for outstanding boards of selectmen. You know, it talks about leadership. Well, leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum. Leadership comes from a culture that's created and nurtured. And in the municipal sense, it comes from elected officials. And I've been so incredibly fortunate to work for outstanding elected officials over the years, and working with so many outstanding people. So it's a wonderful honor. It's an outstanding honor, and I thank you so much. And I just want to thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you.
On the closure, it's my privilege to honor John Spillane for his service to the Research Bureau. John, if you could step forward, and also comment on the last 2 years of my affiliation with he and Tim McCarthy as being impressive in the sense of their commitment to the mission of this institution or organization, and the way they've conducted themselves in terms of the leadership for both the executive committee and the board of directors. So John, thank you on behalf of all of us for your service, and we have a small gift for you, and here we go. I want to thank Secretary Peyser again for coming and spending the time with us, and for a superb presentation. And again, please take advantage of his presence in the foyer. And before I dismiss everybody to the foyer for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Have fun.